All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg, and I'm just going to brush my hair back a little bit and welcome Andy Ellis back to Halitics. Hey, Andy, how you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good, Hal. I'm glad to be here as always, and look forward to the conversation.
Well, I love having you on, Andy. And one of my regrets or disappointment, I don't know what the right word is, hopes is that I'll be able to bring you to a broader audience. And my numbers are really small, but they are growing a little bit. So the goal here is to expose the positions that you espouse, which I believe we need in our state, to as many Marylanders as possible. So that's what our goal is here today. And let me ask you on that specific vein, how is it going? That's what you've been doing, is you're out there talking to people. How do you feel your message is coming across?
You know how I think it's going great. At the end of June, we were in Frederick for Pride, and then we were in Cumberland for Pride. The week before that, I have been in Salisbury for Juneteenth, and just going out to all these different parts of the state. It is very clear that people understand that the two-party system isn't working for them. They understand that billionaires run both of the parties and that the people are left behind. More than ever, folks understand that, and they're willing to have the conversations about why the Green Party is an alternative. And I think, for me, what more can I ask for than folks who understand the problem and are willing to discuss the solution that we have to offer? So I'm feeling really good about it. We're about, I think, 466 days out from the election. I'm counting, but not down to the precise day. But we released a 500-day plan. We're going hard this summer to try to raise the money that we need in order to hire the folks that will bring on board in the fall. So I don't know, it's great. I'm feeling really good about it, really energized. And I guess the thing that is most interesting to it about me is, in a time when so many political conversations are so bleak and so dark right now, these conversations I've been having with people about how we can have a future that is different than what we have right now have been really optimistic, have been really hopeful, and have been really energizing. And it has helped me stay energized to talk to people who are dealing with real life stuff, but have hope that things can maybe be better.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And I appreciate folks who are looking for solutions, because we are I think, as a nation and as a world, in a very dark place. I talk about that. It's not fun. It's not pleasant to think about. So if anyone's working like you are to make things a little better, I mean, that's awesome. My hat, everything I doff, everything I have to you, Andy, for doing that. Let me just sort of, on the same topic, but switching gears just slightly from the Green Party. Does the victory, pretty, I would say, decisive win in the New York City primaries by Zohran Mamdani, running as a Democrat, but kind of against against the Democratic establishment, does that give you also some optimism about the potentiality of converting folks not just to a Democratic socialist, as he calls himself, but to a non-Democrat altogether?
Totally. What I have the most optimism about out of that is not what the politicians did, but what the voters did. The voters looked at somebody that the media was calling an anti-Semite, was calling a communist, was calling whatever word they could come up with, whatever generation's word they could come up with to describe that thing they hate about people who believe in collectivism and justice. And the voters said, nah, we understand what you're saying about him, and we're voting for him anyway. And that, to me, is what is inspiring about it. We'll see what he does, and we may get into that a little bit. I know there's some people who've been very concerned about what he's done since the election, since the Democratic primary and things like that.
I'm raising my hand. I'm concerned.
Yeah. And so for me, it's not like Mamdani is our savior. It is those voters heard the narratives put on by the biggest billionaires and the biggest corporations in the country, and they said, we don't care, we're voting in our interest anyway, we're voting for affordability, and we're voting for justice. And that, to me, is inspiring. And I think that is the lesson that I'm taking out of it, that is, voters are willing to vote in their best interests.
What about, though, the fact, just to throw a little cold water on that analysis, which I largely agree with, but what I also have to bear in mind is that Mamdani really kind of drew to an inside straight. I mean, he's running against an incredibly rightfully despised, discredited former governor, and likewise a discredited mayor who, is neck deep in corruption scandals.
Totally. All of that is true. And it is still inspiring that in that case, in 2025, the voters of New York City looked at the choices they had and said, yes, we want the so-called democratic socialist, and yeah, there's limits, there's possibilities, all of that stuff for sure. But I think what that race shows is that voters are not, sometimes voters are going to go for the person that hammers home the message about affordability and justice. And if we can take anything out of that race, it is to be very clear on what we are doing for regular working class people to be able to afford to live in our expensive state, and how it is that we orient ourselves to justice and a willingness to call out Zionism and the genocide that Israel is engaged in, and to not back down from it, at least in the primary.
All right, we've got Andy Ellis with us. As you can see, he is running for governor here in Maryland he's running to be the Green Party nominee. Let me be very clear. And that means he is running for governor, but to become the nominee of the Green Party. And you can learn much more about Andy, including helping his campaign at gogreen26.com, which is a really good website. I think I got a couple of screen captures we'll share in a little bit. I do want to urge folks, by the way, I noticed, Andy, yesterday's video, I think this thumbnail was of AOC. I'm not even sure. I can't remember now, but it's done very well, better than most of mine. So the problem, though, is a lot of views, not a lot of subscribers. So if you're watching this and you haven't yet clicked subscribe, please do that. And also, let me do it again because it was hidden. The subscribe button was a little bit hidden. So I want to give it to you one more time, the pop-up with the bell. And also, we really appreciate any thumbs up, any interactions, there's your thumbs up, but also any kind of commentary. And you know what, Andy, even if you hate my video, tell us that. Tell me what's wrong, or don't. Just say you suck, you're the worst. But we don't say that about Andy, but say it about me if you want. But anything will do. I will take that over nothing. And finally, we do have the Facebook. I won't cover up your lower third there, Andy, but we do have the Facebook Halitics, which is getting a good number of people. So a lot of different places you can get your Halitics Jones and Andy, of course, often on our program. Just want to always center Gaza, the worst place in the world because of the United States and Israel's imperialism and now genocide. This is from yesterday's Anadolu with John C., and they updated some numbers. So we're going to update yesterday's numbers because we don't have today's. You can see it's July 23rd, 25, 59,200 plus, and that's just identified, just brought into the hospitals. It's so horrific, Andy. And let me just give the final here. At least 59,219 Palestinians now killed in Israel's genocidal war since the 23rd, since the pretext was laid by Hamas when it committed its crime going into Israel. And we had 113 more killed through yesterday and Wednesday. And Trump now, I think, is alone responsible, along with Netanyahu, let's see, for well over 8,000 Gazans and likely over 4,000 women and children killed. So I just can never lose sight of this. And I feel like this is, I actually feel a moral imperative. I want to discuss this, but I also feel that it's a moral duty at this time.
It absolutely is, Hal, and I appreciate you centering it in every version, in every show that you do. Look, like this is such a transformative and profoundly devastating thing for us to be able to watch and see happening, and to happen. And I think that it's not going away. It doesn't matter who the president is. Both parties are complicit in genocide. Both parties are supporting genocide. And, it's only going to get worse from here. So I appreciate you grounding it in that. And it just speaks to the necessity we have to break away from this system that the billionaires own, where both parties are in the pocket of Israel and, no matter what they do. So.
Questions, comments, call us 240-242-5646. I'm going to put up Andy's position from his website, Maryland, Israel, and Palestine, in a moment. But just to continue kind of in a conversational vein, Are we in a darker place now, Andy, as a nation than you might have envisioned? And you're a bit younger than I am, but personally, and I don't remember the Vietnam War. I was alive. I don't remember the bombing of Cambodia. I do remember what W did to Iraq and the destabilization of the Middle East, Abu Ghraib. To me, this is a step further down a dark road than I've seen our country take.
Totally. And I think that, first election I voted in was, I think, 1996. And I think since 1996, I've constantly watched every year be worse than the last on almost every register. Genocide, war, imperialism, white supremacy, wealth inequality, environmental destruction, climate collapse are all worse than they were in the past. We're not making progress on these things. And we're not making progress on them because billionaires own our political system. And these are the outcomes that they're paying for, either because they want them or they don't care about them in order to get what they do want, which is wealth and massive power. So yes, we're in a terribly dark time. I guess for me, it increases the necessity to get out of that dark time, to understand that our only path forward is to build something better. We are not going to be able to get out of it by trying to reform this system. There's no liberal way out of the two-party system. There's no liberal way out of genocide, capitalism, white supremacy, wealth inequality, and imperialism in the two-party system. And if we want a way out of it that doesn't involve a whole bunch of people in the United States getting killed, we're going to have to do it by building alternative forms of political power that can transform the two-party system away from something that is only meant for the enrichment and empowerment of billionaires.
Yeah, you took all those words out of my mouth. I did put on the screen there your website clip from, or screenshot of your position on Maryland, Israel, and Palestine. Do you want to expand on that a little bit? And then I do want to discuss with you your view, your opinion, as you stated, that the two-party system is not capable of changing our policy, our pro-genocide policy. I want you to expand on that, but just real quick, your actually published position on this issue.
Sure. So the Green Party has long had a position in line with Palestinian civil society against U.S. complicity in Israeli genocide, apartheid, and settler colonialism. And so when I started this race, I was looking for ways that that position could be relevant to Maryland. And the first thing I had was this Larry Hogan executive order, which made it so that people could not boycott if they were state employees. The reason that's an issue is because Wes Moore gleefully adopted it and passed and continued it on, and did so while condemning a movement against boycotting, divestment, and sanctions, a non-violent movement in order to challenge genocide. So that was where I started with this in this campaign. And then I think last fall, I think in fall of 2023, spring of 2023, and the spring of 2024, when all of the student protests were happening and they were focusing on divestment, I think that really shifted my position at that point to understand that while the boycott executive order is important, Maryland is materially invested in the genocide of the Palestinian people and of the settlements and the occupation and all of that. And so as we started to look into divestment, we started to look at things like the Maryland Israel Development Center, the collaboration between UMBC and Tel Aviv University, and things like how much of Maryland's pension funds are invested in Israeli stocks and bonds. And as we start to look into these things, we start to see that it is not symbolic like the executive order on boycotts is. It is real material investment of Marylanders' money into the Israeli military complex, into their nation building project, and into the effort to commit genocide in Gaza. So right now, that's what we're really focused on. We're really focused on figuring out how we connect with divestment campaigns in order to build a Maryland that is not investing our pension dollars and our pension dollars and our taxpayer dollars in the current Israeli genocide.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And we've seen poll after poll showing that the position of the American public is moving towards Palestine and away from Israel, and very rapidly and with big majorities, especially among Democrats, but even among younger Republicans that are strongly pro-Palestine, anti-Israel. But you're running in, and thank you also, Andy, as a digression, thank you for, tying this issue, tying the fight against genocide, against militarism to our state, right? Because you're running for governor. People might say, well, governor, it's state. It's not really foreign policy. It's not Israel. And I'm really appreciative how you made it very clear why this does matter to state electeds. Go ahead.
And it shouldn't matter. Right? Like if we did not keep having governors who thought that being a Maryland governor uniquely qualified to be the president, they might not embrace these things. But Hogan embraced this executive order and this Maryland Israeli Development Center because he wanted to get in good with the Israel lobby, because he had eyes on national office. And Moore is doing the same thing. And so for me, the solution is not actually that Maryland has to be involved in this. It is to get Maryland not involved in this, right? We do not need to determine who gets to contract with the state of Maryland based on their position on Israel and Palestine. That is a ridiculous standard to apply to somebody who wants to contract with the state of Maryland. We do not need to be investing Maryland taxpayer dollars in Israeli defense corporations. We do not need to have a cooperation agreement between UMBC and Tel Aviv University. And we do not need to be buying Israeli stocks and bonds in order to fund their genocide. And so I wish that this wasn't an issue that the governor had to deal with, because it is not relevant to most Marylanders, but it is relevant to the political careers of the men who have been the governor of this state for the last 12 years or so. And that, I think, illustrates a real problem with the way that this issue has become part of Maryland politics.
All right, Maryland Green Party activist and leader who is running for the nomination of the Green Party to be governor, to be our next governor next year, Andy Ellis with us. And Andy, I wanted to get back to this question I had for you to specifically weigh in on. Yes, Americans are moving away from Israel forcibly, but you're in Maryland. You're only campaigning for votes from Marylanders. Isn't our state a little bit more likely to be pro-Israel, to be Zionists? There are many Jewish folks, especially in my county, Montgomery County, and Baltimore County, and they tend to be more affluent as well. And those two factors, I think, would maybe suggest, I'm asking you, I'm wondering, is there a political price that you have to pay to embrace humanity, to embrace an end to senseless killing and massacres?
Sure, there's a political price for that, right? Like, there's always a political price for standing up against Israeli genocide and American complicity with it. The system is structured in order to exact that price on anybody who does it. And the two-party system is designed to make that a toll that no one is willing to take on. But we have to take it on, because one of the most effective means by which the United States has subsidized the defense of Israel over the last whatever number of years is by structuring the political system so it's impossible to talk about or criticize Israel in the United States. Like, that is a means of providing direct material aid to a genocidal nation, and we have to break that down. There's a price to pay. Look, I mean, I was recently laid off from my job that I had worked at for 15 years. And while I don't want to talk about the details of that, looking for a new job while having, videos of me on here saying this or at other places saying what I'm going to say is, I know, going to be very difficult, because the same AI that reads the resumes and checks the social media is the same AI that is similar to the AI that is doing that in Israel and for customs and things like that. So it's like already feel like I'm paying a price for that, but not nearly the price that many activists are paying. If you look at what happened to the students at Towson University or some of the students at Hopkins, beyond the big and bold things that we see on the national level, those students are still dealing with discipline for doing things as simple as saying we should not be complicit in genocide and our university should divest. So, of course, there's a political price to pay for it, but this is one of the systems that we need to break down if we want to get to a place where genocide is not the norm for American and Maryland politics.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up a lot of issues there, a lot of the ramifications that result when you stand up against evil, and it seems as though at least the institutions we would hope would be fighting for justice, like elite colleges and universities, Johns Hopkins, one of the top schools in the world, and yet again they're working with the Israel genociders and the American genociders. We're seeing this with Columbia University, this deal they just cut. I don't know if you saw that at all. It was reported in the New York Times, $200 million
ridiculous
penalty, and they're going to put all the power to discipline in the president. And there's a promise that any of the student protesters who were blocking the hall there will face serious discipline, which means, if not expulsion, multi-year suspensions. This is what our government is pushing down on colleges and universities, which seem all too willing to comply.
Right. I mean, the movements to ask the colleges and universities to divest from Israel really, I think, were more of a break with the system than anything I've seen in a really long time. I mean, they exposed the way that these universities are serving largely as investment houses, chock full of government money with tax breaks in order to buttress Israel. And not just Israel, fossil fuels and prisons and all sorts of other corporate interests. And I think once we started to pull on that string, tug on that thread of where those universities were invested in Israel, we also saw the way that they're invested in the military-industrial complex. We also saw the way that they're invested in the surveillance state. We see the way that they're invested in private prisons. We see the way that they're invested in corporations. And the call for divestment hits the universities at their core, because it challenges their ability to stack ridiculous amounts of tax-free money. And, you know, like, I really think that those student protests last year will really go down as one of the most important times of protests in the history of this country. And I think the further we get from it, the more we'll realize how significant they were at changing the narrative about what's going on in Israel and around the world.
What the government is doing, the federal government is doing, is saying to colleges and universities, mentioned Columbia, Johns Hopkins, Maryland, if you want federal funding, then you're going to punish people who speak for justice.
Yep.
Do you think that these schools should be getting all that federal money?
You know, I mean, the way that the university system is designed right now, like, it's not as much that they're getting the federal money that I have a problem with. It's the lack of being taxed on it that I think is the problem. Like, the lack of taxes that go to the local jurisdiction. So there's an effort here right now in Hopkins in order to get them to pay their fair share, because they're the largest property owner and the largest employer in the city of Baltimore. And they've got a billions of dollars in endowment, and they're getting all of this sort of tax breaked money coming in. Because they're acting like corporations. They're creating patents, right? Like, these big research universities at this point are science machines that are using low-wage labor in order to get corporations really advanced patents and really advanced research. And I don't have a huge problem with federal money going to research. What I have a huge problem with is the state and local governments that have no power over those universities in order to force them to live up to their nonprofit mandate of helping the communities that they're located in, and no power to tax them, no power to say, hey, Johns Hopkins, you are engaging in straight up for-profit corporate activity in a lot of your functions, and you should pay taxes on that so that our firefighters can have new equipment, so that our schools can have HVAC, and so that the people of Baltimore aren't paying to subsidize Johns Hopkins. So, before we get to the question of whether the federal money should get there, we need to talk about the way that state and local government can exert power over these universities in order to make them live up to their nonprofit mission, help the people they live around and the communities they're built on top of. And if they had done that years ago, there would be a lot more people rallying to the defense of these universities. If Johns Hopkins had been spending as much money helping the people of Baltimore to address their problems and their concerns in a way that their unique knowledge and unique resources can, then there'd be a whole lot of people rallying behind Johns Hopkins University right now. But because they haven't done that, we're in this situation where the feds are coming for them, and most of the working class is like, well, whatever, not my problem.
Is that part of your platform? I didn't look into that, and we kind of gone off. We were saying we would kind of do a freewheeling show and go off in different directions. And this is certainly part of what I want to talk about, was the institutional failure to hold Trump even a little bit accountable. In fact, they've not only failed to hold him accountable, they're working with him. Does your platform include efforts to force these wealthy, powerful institutions to pay their fair share?
Yeah, absolutely. So meds and eds are these institutions that have sort of open-ended, and by that I mean universities and hospitals. Universities and hospitals are these sort of institutions that have nonprofit status. They're massive employers. They're massive property holders. They serve a ton of food. They know how to house people. They know how to do a bunch of things that would benefit the communities that they're situated on top of. And if they had a regenerative approach to building community, like Dr. DeVarian Baldwin talks about in The Shadow of the Ivory Tower, then we would be able to have universities that were helping communities thrive based on having a center of knowledge and research in their community. Instead, what we have is extractive, incredibly powerful political forces. In some ways, Baltimore City is a company town for Johns Hopkins. Johns Hopkins is the most powerful employer. They're the most powerful. They make tons of political contributions. They even have their own police force, right? They even have their own private police force. And we've got to figure out how to use the power of the state in order to redirect these resources that universities are accumulating toward the common good, and instead of the enrichment of a fortress within a city that it is extracting from.
Yeah, I think that's all really important. And I was thinking of something while you were talking, Andy, that's related. Many of these the most elite, the elitist, I don't think that's a word, but the most elite institutions like Hopkins, like Yale, like Harvard, they're not in these wealthy neighborhoods. No. They're actually in somewhat impoverished communities. And I don't think that's just coincidental. I think that you see these ivory towers sort of in, I don't want to say mud, but juxtaposed against poverty and communities that are in need and that have been exploited. And maybe you can draw that connection a little better than I just did.
Totally. So, I think that the person to look to draw this connection is Dr. DeVarian Baldwin. He wrote In the Shadow of the Ivory Tower. And what he talks about is the way that these universities situated mostly in urban areas like Columbia, like Yale, like Hopkins, some of these different things, the way that they have come to dominate the area around them, the way that they have worked to devalue property so that they then can gobble it up, right? And so now one of the inspiring things about this is in New Haven, there was an organization called New Haven Rising that came together, that it was workers, community members, campus people, students, and they forced them to pay. They forced Yale to pay more money, to pay more taxes, to contribute more to the community, to do the things that they hadn't been doing. And that sparked a movement that is now also happening in Durham. It's happening here in Baltimore, and it's starting to happen around the country, to get folks to force these universities to be good, constructive community partners. We should be excited to have the best medical facility in the world right here in East Baltimore. And we should also not have the highest concentration of poverty and health disparities also right at the feet of the best hospital in the world. And if we worked on this in the right way, we would have these institutions would be bringing the community along with them. When I was door knocking in Baltimore in 2018 in East Baltimore, people were excited that Johns Hopkins was there. All they wanted from it was a good paying union job, not an exploitive job that was sent out to contractors. But people were proud to be able to say that hospital right down the street where my brother and sister worked and my children were born or whatever is one of the best in the world. Now, if we could just force but what they wanted was good jobs, good wages, a good community partner and things like that. And we need to use the force of local and state government in order to make these universities do this. If not just for the communities, for the survival of these institutions, because the Trump administration and the right has understood exactly what their critique of these institutions are, and they have set on a policy in order to obliterate them. And if we want them to exist as centers of thought, centers of knowledge, centers of research, centers of exchange, we need to figure out how to reshape them into things that help the people in the communities that they're in. Otherwise, they're going to get evaporated by the Trump administration and the right, who is ready to eliminate them. And I don't think we need to eliminate them. I think we need to turn their power to good and to turn their power to community. Now, let me say one other thing about this. So Devarian Baldwin writes In the Shadow of the Ivory Tower. And there's also a book by a woman named Maya Wind that writes a book called Towers of Ivory and Steel. And she talks about the way that these elite American universities have these connections with the Israeli university system in the furtherance of the genocide and apartheid project. And so she really goes into the way that Tel Aviv University, for example, is very much a part of bringing Americans into buying into the genocidal project, the settler project, and all of those other things, and how these connections that Baldwin draws about urban centers that have these major universities in the U.S. are connected to Israeli genocide, and how they're all one and the same project in some ways.
Yeah, all this is really fascinating, and it can be really depressing, but understanding is the first step towards addressing and solving. And yes, our most powerful institutions, some of our most brilliant people who have done some wonderful work, are also corrupt and are also empowering the empire, for want of a better way to describe it. It is interesting. If it weren't so awful, it would be, fascinating, I suppose. Andy, I wanted to get back to, and I do have this video. I showed the thumbnail before, but I want to play it now because we're talking about Democrats who don't fight for what they tell us they'll fight for, that present themselves as one thing and govern in a different way. AOC, kind of the national poster child, but we have, I would say, kind of a mini AOC, although I think she's taller than AOC in Maryland. So here, this is a video done by our good friends at the Divest Now, the Maryland Peace Action, fighting against the Maryland Israel Development Center. And this is on Kristen Mink. Let me play it real quick. It's 1 minute, and then I'll get your comments.
In 2018, Kristen Mink became a viral symbol of grassroots courage. Holding her 2-year-old child, she confronted EPA Chief Scott Pruitt. She told Pruitt this about her child.
Animals, clean air, clean water, for the benefit of all of us, including our children. So I would urge you to resign before your scandals push you out.
That moment launched her political career. A mother speaking out for her child's future, for clean water, for life, for compassion.
But today, that same mother, now a Montgomery County Council member, has voted to fund the Maryland Israel Development Center, an organization tied to Israeli weapons manufacturing.
Any questions from colleagues on the county executive's budget? All right. No, at this time. All right. All those in favor of the Office of the County Executive's FY26 operating budget, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you very much.
All right. So quick comment, Andy, or not quick, and then I want to kind of guide the discussion a little bit more on this issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a perfect illustration of everything that's wrong with the Democratic Party as an alternative to genocide. Like that little tepid bit of protest that was called courageous at the beginning stands in for the real politics of being able to tell the county that we're not going to fund genocide. And you can see she and every other Democrat raised their hand, and we're happy to, fund genocide as a part of a budget. And that little it's so easy to become a Democratic superstar. You hold your kid and you say, I think you should resign to the head of the EPA while your husband is
while your
recording
buddy's videotaping the whole thing and you're thinking this is going to go viral and I won't have to be a public school teacher anymore, which is exactly what happened.
It's such tepid bullshit. And it is what passes for resistance politics at this point. And I would guess that she probably has eyes on higher office. She's voting like she does. And that's the thing here is once you get into a position like this in the Democratic Party and you realize that your career ladder requires staying in the good graces of the Democratic Party, then, what was once protest becomes passivism, or not passivism, passive acceptance of a genocide. Sorry if I
passivity. I think passivity is
what I'm saying.
I was trying to come up with the word myself when you said it.
Yeah, sorry if I used some PG-13 language there.
Oh no, you know what? It's funny because I am known. I know myself as someone who rarely, if ever, uses the obscenities. I never did on radio, which was good because you could get in trouble for that. But I always steer clear. I always try to stay G to PG rated. But the word you used is the exact same word I used to describe the exact same behavior off air. So yes, it is complete BS. And I have a couple thoughts I sort of want to guide. One, I'm glad you mentioned it's not just Kristen Mink. It's every member of that Democratic, completely Democratic county council, every MC, Montgomery County council member is a Democrat, and includes the leader of the president there, Kate Stewart, who I actually sometimes like. Kate, I've met Kate, and she's a nice person. She really is. But yeah, she's not going to buck the rest of the folks there. And it's pushed this whole funding of MIDC, which includes money for software companies that are helping the drones kill people. I mean, they're part of that whole military killing machine. Like people complain about Krups, and we have these companies today that help the Nazis kill Jews. Well, we have companies in Montgomery County operating right now that are helping Israelis kill Palestinians. It includes the county executive, one of the most progressive, so-called, and I think he really is on most issues, Mark Elrich, pushing this hard. Every single one. Is it unfair to single out one like a Kristen Mink that appears to many of us as more hypocritical than the rest, or to single out AOC? People are saying, well, you shouldn't criticize AOC for her vote on funding the Iron Dome when there were 421 other representatives. Why is she? Well, it's not fair. You hate her. How do you respond to that?
Well,
or don't you?
I think you should criticize Kristen Mink and every one of the people who voted for that. I think you should criticize AOC and every one of the people who voted for that. Like Kristen Mink going viral for telling the EPA chief to resign doesn't absolve her from not having to take a moral vote against genocide. And AOC, doing whatever AOC does doesn't absolve her either. Now, I don't think we should just focus on those folks, but I don't think we should not talk about them either,
one of my arguments is that we should especially focus on the ones who are identified with the left because they prove that the Democratic Party isn't reformable, that in its current iteration, it's going to taint whatever possibly good apples ever go into its barrel. And the fact that people like Kristen Mink and AOC and others like them vote for genocide tells you that we absolutely must go in a different direction.
It's progressive except for Palestine, right? And it is like the Kristen Mink is pretty progressive on a lot of issues, right? AOC is pretty progressive on some issues, but not when it comes to Palestine. She's not. Neither of them are. And if you want to move up in the Democratic Party, you cannot be for Palestine. You have to be for Israel. Those are the rules. I don't make them. People who make them don't listen to you and I. But those are the rules. And, so it's like, Wes Moore is seeking national office when a week after October 7th, he goes and he repeats the words. He says Israel has a right to defend itself. Israel has a right to exist, and we stand with Israel, the nation of Israel, and the people. That is a move that says that you want to move upward in the Democratic Party, as much as it is anybody's opinion at this point. Those two things are inseparable. And so, of course, Kristen Mink voted this way. Of course, AOC voted that way. They want to move up in the Democratic Party, and they want the rest of their career to be guaranteed by the connections they've made to the Democratic Party. Simple career move.
Why is it in their best interest politically? Why do they perceive that? I mean, we already discussed, Andy, how the ground is shifting very far against the Zionists at this point. Political opinion has already moved.
They're cowards.
Especially in the Democratic Party.
They're cowards. Right. That's why they have taken a cowardly approach to moving upward within the party, which is to toe the line on Israel. And there is a large reward structure for towing the line on Israel. And there's not much punishment structure in place for not being, or for being for Israel. And we can say that the tide is shifting within the Democratic Party, but it's not changing how elections go, and it's not changing outcomes that much. Here and there, we're getting a person that will stand up and criticize, but not in line with what those numbers say. And so, look, they are cowards. And next time I see Kristen Mink, if she sees this episode and doesn't like that I called her a coward, well, then we can have a conversation about that. But I think that's the answer. I don't actually think
you won't get to, because I've criticized Kristen Mink, and she and I used to actually be pretty close. I was invited to one of her post-election events, which I was flattered, frankly, and I went. And I liked Kristen, but since then I've criticized her on some positions, some that you agree with, by the way. And I'll just briefly bring that up, not to get into an argument about specifically trans rights or how the best way to respond to the trans community, but that I think she uses this type of identity politics. And I know we don't always agree on identity politics or specific issues relating or that are called part of identity politics. I know we don't always agree with that, but I think where we do agree is we both find it very wrong when politicians hide behind a woke, in quotes, position to justify or to excuse really bad policies like this one.
Yeah, they're progressive except for Palestine. And this issue, I think, threatens to undermine the Democratic Party in a really significant way. And I don't think most of the people who are in charge and in elected office have caught up with the way that if there was a viable third party and a viable alternative outside of the Democratic Party that was able to capture these votes, that they would be in real trouble. And I mean, that's why we have to build it. That's why we have to build the alternative that we're building now. So Kristen Mink can't get up there and without any consequence vote this way, because otherwise she will, and AOC will, and everybody else will.
The only challenge she's going to get is from the right. If she was being challenged from the left, if she knew that vote could become a major campaign issue from somebody who was to her left, she'd be much more worried about casting it.
I mean, that's the reality. This is about power and consequences. And if they fear that the power of the people who are opposed to one of their things has the kind of consequences that hurts their elected career, then they're going to vote differently. And that's okay, right? Sometimes people will say, oh, that's performative. They should vote how they feel. I don't want them to vote how they feel. I want them to vote how we tell them to vote and how the voters tell them to vote. I don't really care what Kristen Mink thinks. I care how she votes. I don't care what AOC thinks. I care how she votes.
Well, I think I guess I would respond in thusly. I think most politicians, when push comes to shove, don't have their heads completely up their butts. So they probably feel that Israel is wrong and that we shouldn't fund Israel. But the money, the power, the influence that AIPAC wields and that the pro-Israel lobby wields has prevented them. And I'm not saying they have particularly strong convictions. I don't think these are necessarily moral people, or they wouldn't have gone into politics in the first place. Not present company accepted, of course, but you're not going into party politics, right? You're not going to partisan Democratic Republican politics. Those folks, whatever morality they might have had, is largely worn off.
I won't mince words on this. They are cowards, right? They are afraid to take on the power, even though popular opinion within their party is on the side of ending this genocide and helping protect Palestinians. These folks are unwilling to challenge the powers that be within their party. They're unwilling to challenge some of the donors, and they're unwilling to take the public hit or have the public debate about it because they are cowards. Like I don't.
Well, even with Mamdani, we're seeing him backtrack a little bit, saying, well, I'm going to discourage use of the term globalized intifada. The fact that the billionaire class hates that expression means you should triple down on it.
Right. Like, and, the Democratic Party, the data, this is one of the places where the Democratic Party is so out of line with the data, and they're going to stay out of line with the data because there has to be a willingness within to challenge it and to win. Maybe Mamdani will start to show some of that. No, I agree with you. I believe many of these people think what's happening is wrong, but they know the words that they have to say. They know they have to say Israel has a right to exist, Israel has a right to defend itself, and we stand with the nation of Israel. They know those are the words they have to say if they want a career in democratic politics, and they're not one of 5 or 6 people in a couple of districts. Until they get the backbone to actually say that when it matters, and they're not going to, then genocide is going to continue.
How do we get voters to punish the Democrats and the Republicans for these positions?
Yeah, I think we have to build an alternative that makes sense for folks. And I don't think it can be a single issue. It can't just be Palestine. It has to be an explanation of Palestine, an explanation of how that connects to the daily lived lives of people, and an explanation of how we're going to be able to address the concerns about affordability, about healthcare, about childcare. Mamdani did a great job of that. He combined left-wing talking points about individual material needs, about affordability, about childcare, about healthcare, with an anti-Israel position, and he connected the two of them. It was good. It was good. He did a good job of that stuff in the primary. And yeah, he had the ideal candidates to do it in, and he had a ranked choice voting election to do it in, and he had a bunch of public money, and, he caught fire. A whole bunch of things happened right for him, but he did a great job of connecting the working class issues that everyday New Yorkers are facing to the genocide in Israel, and to explaining why his position on one and his position on the other were connected. And we have to emulate that kind of politics, I think.
I have been harshly critical of many Democrats, including, we discussed some of them today, Kristen Mink, AOC, Kamala Harris. And I've had these conversations with folks who are more Democratic leaning or support Democrats, and they've often said, well, they can't stand against their party. They can't say no to their party. And I've always found that a remarkably frustrating and annoying answer, because of course they could. Kamala Harris was the Democratic nominee, or she was, anointed to be the nominee and became the nominee. She can do whatever the hell she wants. She wants to be president. You look at the polls, you look at what's right, and you speak assuming she even ever thinks that way, I don't know. But of course she could have done, physically, she could have gone out there and said, yes, we'll stop supporting Israel if I'm elected president. But to the point that others are making, psychically, is it too much to ask people who are members of a tribe? They're leaders. They've been chosen to be in among the important people, the chieftains of the group, to say to them, you're going to have to buck that. Is that something that human nature just can't do?
I don't really care, right? We need to ask them. We need to, we need to ask AOC to have some morals, to be oriented toward justice, to not support genocide. And when she doesn't, we need to expose what she's doing and who she is and why she's doing it. And then we need to build an alternative that is going to connect the working class issues that she does sometimes speak out on to the international issues that she's pretty terrible on, and the fact that she and even Sanders pass off as some sort of like leftist on foreign policy just shows you how wedded to the military industrial complex and imperialism both parties are. And so, yeah, ask her and then watch her squirm for days on her social media, and all of her fans try to explain why she's doing good. Point out her answer, and then find some folks who understand that we need a different kind of system, work with them to build it, and then keep asking, knowing full well what her answer is going to be, and use that disappointment in order to build an alternative that allows for peace, justice, democracy, and ecology. That's my approach to this.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. I honestly don't care very much what the psychic cost is for someone to say no to the party. But I bring it up because, to me, to the extent that the answer is yes, yes, we're asking for too much, that this is just not what humans do. To the extent, because people will embrace all sorts of, nonsense to remain part of a group. Religion is a good example of that, in my opinion. But given that, doesn't that also strengthen the case for a Green Party? Since we can't expect the Democratic Party and the leaders in the Democratic Party ever to buck the party, then we need something from the outside that has power and influence.
There has to be something on the outside that can threaten to disrupt the apple cart. There has to be something on the outside that can threaten something. Right? Because otherwise, the people on the left side of the party are stranded. And we see this in Maryland with like a Gabe Acevedo or a Joe Carter or one of those folks who have strong positions, and they're bucking the party on the left, right? But like they can manage to win in their districts, but they are isolated within the party. There's a veto-proof majority around them that means that their voice doesn't matter and their opinion is irrelevant. And so, for folks like that to be able to do their work to try to transform the Democratic Party, which fine is good work, go ahead, do it, but it has to work alongside a threat to be able to leave the party and to be able to join something else. Without that, those folks are on an island by themselves, and they can't buck the party because there's nowhere to go. If we want the Democratic Party to move to the left, there's a Baltimore Sun story today, Gabe Acevedo talking about the party moving toward him. And it might be switching a little bit away from the purple toward a little bit more of the blue, maybe. I'm not really sure that I buy that. But if that is going to be sustainable and that is going to be something the Democrats can hold on to, then they need to be able to play the leverage of saying, well, if I don't get what I want from you, I'm going to go join this party that shares my values and could use my experience. And if we don't have that element, then the work that goes on inside the party is never going to amount to anything because it is going to either be co-opted, crushed, or ignored. But if we have that element, we give those folks more power. I mean, the people who would benefit most from an emergence of a multi-party Maryland right now, I would think are probably the most progressive Democrats who are entirely isolated by the veto-proof majority in Annapolis right now, and are in some ways as isolated as many other Republicans are because they're as unnecessary to any particular vote as any other Republicans are, and so I hear a lot of times the most radical people I know have the most conservative position about electoral politics. And it is always shocking to me that folks that want to build something new and have a hope of a different future in every other realm are so conservative when it comes to electoral politics,
I mean, a perfect example of that is how AOC and Bernie were out there, beating the drum for Joe, demented, cancerous Joe Biden to be the nominee in 24.
Or Wes Moore getting up there and saying, Joe Biden is, I just talked to Joe Biden and he's in perfectly good shape. Like, it's a lie. That is a lie in order to bolster your party's presidential nominee, right? That's not good, not okay.
Yeah, no, I agree with that also. All right, let's get to this story. This is something you and I have discussed a little bit, and I'm not fully understanding this. This does involve the Wes Moore administration. Wes Moore, for those who may not be aware, is the governor of Maryland, and his lieutenant governor, a friend of mine, or at least she was. We were, I was on her speed dial, I believe, Aruna Miller, who I also know personally and like. I mean, I'm actually we're friends. But there seems to be a real corruption there. Andy, tell us what's going on.
Yeah, so I grew up in Frederick, and I've been seeing this news recently about a cricket stadium coming to Frederick. And it had kind of been, I've been busy, I've been campaigning, I've been doing all of that. And I was like, well, that's interesting. I guess Frederick's changing. I wonder why there's a cricket stadium coming there. And then I saw a social media post from Lieutenant Governor Aruna Miller sharing an article talking about the cricket stadium and talking about why the local zoning board should go ahead and approve the cricket stadium. And I have a sort of rule that I live by in Maryland politics, which is if you ever see an elected talking about a zoning issue while the zoning board is weighing in on it, you should go check the people who benefit from the project's campaign donations to that elected. And I did that, and I found this guy, Sanjay Goval, who is the owner of the cricket team and is the one pushing this development. He's a Montgomery County tech billionaire. And he has been a long time donor to Aruna Miller, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars over the year. And what I noticed was in the Moore campaign, he, his wife, his daughter, each maxed out contributions or he and his family each maxed out contributions to Moore and to Miller. So $6,000 is the most that you can give any one candidate in an electoral race in Maryland. But because there's two candidates and a governor and lieutenant governor, you can give each of them $6,000. But not just he. Several LLCs that he owned maxed out to them, and several other businesses that he owns maxed out to them. He also has given over $100,000 to the Democratic Party over the last couple of years. So this is a man who is making investments, not donations. And I don't know if this cricket project in Frederick is what he's investing in. Frederick is growing so much, and there's so much development happening right now that, I bet if we dig further, we're going to find some properties that he's interested in, some places where his businesses are looking for tax breaks and things like that. But it is clear to me that and it's not like, it seems like he and Aruna Miller have been friends for a long time, and he has donated handily. But, when you are the Frederick City Planning Commission and you realize that the guy who's seeking this development has given $100,000 to the local or to the Democratic Party in the last year and has maxed out contributions to the governor and the lieutenant governor, that puts a lot of pressure on your decision. And I would imagine that once we start digging into this, we're going to find that there's other pressure going on and that there's other issues happening. Now, look, I'm not saying anything is illegal here. I think that, these are maxed out donations under our flawed campaign finance system where a person, their family, and the businesses they own can all, basically sit at the same computer, make donations, and just switch who it's coming from. That is a flaw with our campaign finance system. And it affects decisions like zoning and development as one of the primary things that affect, because that's how wealthy people make money. Right.
And there's a lot more profit in a sporting team that's owned, a privately owned sporting team that can sell tickets. There's a lot more profit there than in a public park where everyone can go and relax and sit outside and enjoy fresh air. So That's why we don't get as many public parks as we should. I mean, I think this is a great example of that. Andy, and it is very, we just don't know, I guess. There's no proof, but I will say with regard, and we can come back to this, Westmore has already made it clear, and this is his Lieutenant Governor, Aruna Miller, that he will weigh in on what should be, I believe, very local decisions. So a friend of mine who was, I believe, the consensus choice, or at least the majority choice, to be appointed to the Maryland House of Delegates, very well-known Healthy Maryland, which is single-payer advocate, was apparently poised to be nominated by the Annapolis or Anne Arundel County Board and Democrats and Central Committee there, and instead they got a call, some of them, and were told by the governor himself or one of his top aides, no, you don't vote for her, you vote for him. And
Yes, and what I would say to that person, if they are listening, is come join us and help us build the kind of power that can challenge that corruption, advocate for single payer, and advocate for justice in Palestine. I understand that there is work to be done on this side of the aisle, and there's work to be done over here, but the story you just told happens to too many people whose activism is funneled into the Democratic Party, and we need to get them to come join us, build an alternative, and create something that punishes folks who benefit from that type of insider dealing and serves the people by putting the person who is working for them and not the party bosses into the seat.
Yeah, and this person, totally incorruptible. I mean, I know her very well, and she speaks her mind, and I'm sure you know who I'm talking about, every single time. And, that's not who the governor wants in the House of Delegates. That
person and many of the other folks who have experienced similar things. My hope is that we can use this campaign in order to demonstrate to folks like that this is a viable place for them to engage in politics, because there are so many talented people who have been talented, principled, ethical, and righteous and just people who have been funneled into the Democratic Party because that is the way that you are able to govern in this state. And, we need to break that down. And we need to break that down so that those people have an alternative, so that they have a choice. And they don't have to take the dirty or the bad pill. They don't have to take the bad medicine. They can do something that is for the people, not for the bosses, and not serving the national narrative.
Right. And I mean, what do you have to lose? Because if your theory is, well, I want power, you don't have power. You might get into office, but you have to do exactly what your committee chair tells you. You have to vote and the only people who get to be committee chairs are the ones who are going to only advance legislation that the president of the Senate or whatever the House Speaker wants, the delegate House Speaker. So you really don't have power. So I say to people like even Gabe Acevedo, what do you have to lose to Buck? But they do have something to lose. They have a decent, they have health care, they have a salary. I mean, personally, they get something out of it.
Look, for a Gabe or a Rashida Tlaib or an AOC, I don't think they're going to make that choice. I don't think they're going to do what Shane did on his way out. I don't think they're going to make that choice to switch. But the next time a young person with Gabe's background and experience comes up, I want there to be a viable Green Party there so that they have that choice as the path that they take. The next time somebody with AOC's narrative is running, I want there to be a viable Green Party so that they can choose something that is not sold out to the corporations, the billionaires, the Israelis, and the military-industrial complex.
Yeah, here. Andy, I did move us away from Frederick and cricket. Did you have a final wrap-up on that issue, or did we miss something else that you want to get to or not explore a topic as deeply as you were hoping to do?
Sure. So all I will say on this thing in Frederick and cricket is they have about a month to approve it. And as I said to somebody about this a couple of weeks ago, if the governor, the lieutenant governor, and this tech billionaire are behind it, it's probably going to get rolled through in this relatively small city council. Now, they do have an election this year. So city council has an election this year in Frederick. And what I hope happens is that the kind of zoning decision that gets made for the benefit of the wealthy and for the benefit of Montgomery County politicians who have gotten a lot of donations from that wealthy person is that it calls into question the future of this town that is developing very quickly. And it gives the people in Frederick an opportunity to see the need that they have to guard against this kind of money and influence going forward in the future. So, I mean, I think we're going to see what happens with this Frederick story. I think that there's clearly some interest there. There's probably something other than a cricket stadium that the billionaire is interested in. And there's probably something other than a cricket stadium that the administration is interested in. So I will just say, put a pin in this. This is probably the only place that has talked about it. And when it becomes a big story a year from now, you can go back and talk about how you basically broke, you and I broke this story. But that's what I will say about it right now.
I didn't break it. Wait, you broke it. I had nothing to do with it. I broke it, and I chose your show to come talk about it first. Right. Well, to be fair, it's on your website, but yes, to talk about it. So thank you.
Look, I mean, I've done
I don't want to get the credit. I don't deserve it. I didn't do it. I mean, I'm happy to pronounce. If more, let me say this though, I'm not being a coward. If more Miller want to go after me for having Andy on, yes, I'm guilty. I did give Andy this platform. He always is welcome to it, but you get the credit, not me.
Yeah. So I mean, look, what I'll say is like I always look. Whenever an elected is weighing in on a local zoning issue, I go look and see who's benefiting from that zoning issue, and I go type them into the campaign finance database, and usually there's something there. This one made me blush. I was like, ooh, like this man is very obvious in his donating, and he wants something, and it's going to get stuff, you know. And I mean, to me, that speaks to the way the billionaires own both parties. You know, this guy has made donations in the past to people other than Aruna Miller. He's made donations to Republicans, and if you're a billionaire who wants to play ball in this state, you're going to give whoever is in that position of power whatever money you can, so that they take your phone call and they approve your cricket stadium when you want it. You know, and so, yeah, we'll see. We'll see if this story goes anywhere. It could just entirely be that there's maxed out donations from this man, his family, and his LLCs, and it has nothing to do with anything other than just his, you know, love of Moore and Miller. But I imagine there's something more there.
All right, so we've gone through our political topics, and I wasn't going to go in this direction, but since we talked about cricket, and cricket is, I guess, kind of like baseball, which I believe, based on your Facebook post, is your favorite sport. And let's just talk, unfortunately, your favorite team, though, Andy, not doing so well. So can't avoid that fact, can we?
It is not, you know, private equity doesn't solve anything, right? We were like, yes, David Rubenstein, son of Baltimore, he has bought the team and he is going to use his private equity billions in order to make it good. Well, look where we are. You know, I don't think it's all his fault, but at the same time, like, the team just seems to be playing badly.
What a disappointment. Last year they were in the playoffs, right? They had a really good year for a change.
Yeah, the last 3 years, they've been really good. They have the best farm system in baseball. They've got all these prospects. They got these young guys that come up here, and it is like the Democratic Party. It's like where dreams go to die. It seems like Camden Yards, where dreams go to die, it feels like has been this season. And it is like, you know, the private equity billionaire who's in charge is not always cracked up to be, and we need to figure out a new solution. Now, it's not just his fault, but he's the head, he's the owner. You know, he's the one who promised good stuff. He spent his billions of dollars, and he said, like the last billionaire who bought the team, that he was going to promise us a World Series, and we're as far away from a World Series as we have been in any time in the last while. So.
Well, I give you a lot of credit because you're a very loyal fan, and I'm a fair weather fan. I mean, if the team is good, I'll follow them. I'll like them. I mean, I'm a big San Francisco Giants fan, but only really when they're good, and they happened to be good when I was in California, so that worked out for me. But otherwise, no. And I like the Orioles. I would go up there, but I want to just worry this a little bit longer before we let you go. A couple of thoughts I've had about the Orioles. One, I have an issue. Well, let me say, I have an issue with the stadium. I like the stadium. It's pretty. It's nice, but it's so loud. That brick yard with the noise from those, they blast the music. I can't, that keeps me away. That is a specific reason I will not go to games. It's just too loud.
It's terrible. It's like they have bad speakers. So they're using taxpayer money to upgrade the sound system. So maybe that will be good. But what it has seemed like in the past is they have bad speakers that they solve for being bad by cranking them up to 11. And it is like, okay, like, this is not a good way to do it. And, you know, the billionaire that bought the team from the other billionaire is using $600 million in taxpayer stadium to make the sound system better. So maybe next year you'll be able to go to games where they won't have to crank it up to 11 in order for you to hear the muffled 98 Rock songs.
Well, you know what? I think, honestly, Andy, and I'm no sound engineer, even though I do sound, but I think it's the acoustics. I don't think there's only so much you can do with the speakers because there is that brick wall across, you know what I'm talking about, on the other side of the outfield fence where you have the Utah alley with all the food vendors, the food court. and there's this giant fence, brick wall. It's not a fence, and I think the noise, that the wall of sound, it just bounces back at you.
I'm just saying, it is 2025, and they got Michael Bloomberg money on their side. They should be able to come up with a speaker system that deals with the acoustics of the place they're in.
Put up big baffles. You know what they need to? Those big sort of styrofoam or soft styrofoam baffles on the wall.
Right.
And that would
every time I go, my watch is like, hey, it is so loud here that you need to protect your hearing. And it is not because of all the fans cheering, for Gunnar Henderson. It's because of those crazy speakers there. And so, I hear you. It's the acoustics, all of that. But it is 2025. And rich people can make sure sound works for them.
They can direct the note, right? They can direct it. That's your point. I think that's a great point. I hadn't thought of that. I agree with that. Also, there's the theory that loud, unpleasant noise makes you drink more because you're so disorientated that you go drink more, which I believe is true.
We have the most expensive beer second most expensive beer of any stadium in baseball. And I was a Birdland member, and you used to get a 25% discount on beer and all those things when you had the Birdland card because you had already paid for overpriced season tickets. And they took that away this year. They took away some other benefits. And it's like, you have $600 million of our money, and you're making it harder for the fans to enjoy the game. And the ones who actually come when your team is crappy, and it is like, this is why last year or 2 years ago, we were making the call for the public to own the team, because we should be able to say, no, don't take our Birdland benefits away and fix those damn speakers and do it with your money.
I support public ownership. I do, but there's costs with that too. The risks involved and
sure. I wouldn't put it past Wes Moore if the state owned the team to get out there and manage sometimes, right? Given his love for, putting on the sports jersey and looking like he's in charge of stuff. I wouldn't, I imagine Tony Mansolino, oh gosh, Wes Moore is here again. So if we had a publicly owned team, I think that would be a real risk here. But look, there's other risks of it. There's no way to engage in this multi-billion-dollar business of professional sports without some risk to the state, to the private business, to the community, all the time. But the best way to do it is to put it in public hands and not allow the billionaires to have teams that they own and stadiums that are subsidized by the taxpayers.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that's right. And I think a big reason for this fact is that if it's not a natural monopoly, it's certainly a monopoly that's protected by the government. So you're giving outsized profits to the owners and the public pays for that. So yes, we agree. As on almost everything, Andy, we agree on that. One more nit to pick regarding the Orioles. And we alluded to the fact, or mentioned the fact, that Baltimore is a city with a high poverty rate, a lot of challenges, a lot of people living in tough circumstances. And then you have the jewel we mentioned, Johns Hopkins, another jewel, the Orioles. I really want to see, and maybe they do this. I talked about this 10 years ago when I was doing radio, 11, 12 years. I want to see the Orioles, I'll see every team do this, set aside 5,000, 10,000 tickets, something like that, for every home game that they distribute to folks who are below a certain income level who live within a couple of miles of the stadium.
Now 5,000 to 10,000 per game is probably a little high, but it is good to shoot for because hopefully it will be good again and the seats will be filled and the state will be making.
I was going to say, it doesn't even go. There's no one. They got that many empty seats every game.
Yeah. But they used to have a program that was like this. And I will say that the Rubenstein ownership has brought back some of this. They've brought back a connection with Harlem Park Elementary School, and they've brought back some of the programs that used to exist that had them in the community. I think the difference between Rubenstein growing up as a working class person in Baltimore and the son of John Angelos, Angelos growing up the son of a wealthy lawyer in Baltimore, changes the dynamics of how they interact with the city. So this is one place where I think Rubenstein is better than the last Angelos was. And I think that I think he still has an opportunity to get better and to do more of that. Now, there's some problems with that as well. But it is better than it was under the last ownership group, right? If you just think about it psychologically, self-made billionaire versus son of self-made billionaire, right, son of self-made billionaire is going to be more of a whatever, less likely
You
to.
don't always know that. Sometimes the offspring of the rich are, truly public spirited. People say that about the Rockefeller family,
Well, true, fair
arguably
enough.
about the Kennedys. I don't know.
I think the son of a billionaire is less likely to support community programs for the city of Baltimore than a person who grew up as a working class person in the city of Baltimore. But nine
I
times
won't
out
argue.
of 10,
I won't argue with you.
So but they're doing some of that stuff, and I think that stuff is good. I think that stuff is important, and I think one of the things that, especially in Baltimore, is like Black people are not playing baseball at the level that they used to. And in your major Black cities, baseball attendance is way down. And if you want to see baseball thrive in Baltimore and Cleveland and Pittsburgh and Detroit again, baseball needs to have a program to make sure that more young Black folks are playing the sport, more are getting drafted, more are playing long and full careers. There are certainly African descended folks there, but many of them are from the Caribbean, from Latin America.
They're Black Latinos.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean there aren't some, Black American baseball players, but the decline in Black American baseball players, I think, has been a real significant problem for Major League Baseball over the last 2 decades or so. And I hope a place like Baltimore can be part of transforming that and turning it around. If I'm governor and we are, and we manage to get Rubenstein to give us the Orioles, one of the things that we're going to do is invest in those programs. And we're going to do that anyway. But I think the connection with the Major League Baseball team is a really significant way to help that. And I appreciate you calling out the need to do that. I think the Rubensteins have done better than the Angelos. And I still think we need to do better yet still.
Oh, yeah. There's so many good reasons to do it. I mean, one of them, Andy, and this will be my final word, and then I'll give you your final word. But one big reason is that major league teams do impose real costs on their communities. And this kind of was brought to mind with all the traffic. Games end at 10, 11 o'clock. All the traffic, the streets are crowded. It's noisy. So the people who live around the same, now I know Federal Hill there's actually gotten more and more affluent of late, but you pay a price to have that team near you. And generally it's poor, struggling, and working class people who pay that price. So I'd really like, and people of color, specifically Black, generally Black, but not necessarily, of course, that should be recognized, and they should be given, I believe they deserve some
reparation,
a dispensation for that.
Yeah. Yes. Reparation for the land that gets taken. No, we can talk about that another time. But look, I mean, one of the goals right now of Major League Baseball and these owners is to get cities and states to agree to these deals in order to give them the property around the stadium so that they can turn it into this multi-use, like mixed wealth development. And by mixed wealth development, they mean upper middle class people and rich people. And so stadiums have made that part of the extraction effort that they have when they negotiate with cities and states, is that they get this sort of special entertainment district around the stadium. They have this in Atlanta, but in Atlanta, they build it in the suburbs. In Baltimore, they want it with that stadium. And that means that they're going to displace working class people who happen to still live near the stadium. And they're not going to get much compensation for it. They're just going to be told to move somewhere else, and maybe they can get a job at the stadium or something like that. So this is part of the hustle. This is part of the way that the monopoly of baseball owners colludes to extract resources from cities and states in order to keep them there. And they use this sort of threat of like, well, Nashville and Portland sure would like a team, in order to get cities and states to cough up taxpayer money, to cough up development deals, and to cough up tax-free development around the stadium. And it is like, we need to stop that. And the only way we're going to stop that, I think, is with some form of public ownership of these teams. So, it was an issue with the Orioles. I wish that if cricket were coming to Frederick, it was because the city of Frederick decided it wanted a cricket team, not because some billionaire connected to Moore and Miller decided he wanted a cricket team and they had good land. So I think this question oftentimes feels like a niche issue that only appeals to certain kinds of socialist sports fans, but it should appeal to everybody, because these corporations, which have a federally protected monopoly, are using that monopoly in order to coerce cities and states out of taxpayer resources, out of property, and out of tax dollars by extorting them. And that has to end.
Andy, thanks so much for joining me. Thank you all for being part of Halitics. I'll be back tomorrow for the free-for-all, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.